The screen flashed, connecting, and then died to gray, and Elena said, "Lucas, please pick up." The silence rang like a dial tone that never learned mercy. The call timer stopped at 0:59, and she said, "I was here, I'm still here." Her apartment hummed with the fridge and her pulse. A notification popped up from Aria, and Elena said, "Why is she texting at this hour?" She watched her reflection in the black screen and forgave none of it. Lucas said, 5 minutes I promised 2 hours ago, which felt like a spell with no exit. The cursor blinked inside an unsent message, and Elena said, "If you can't come, at least tell me why." Jonah's warning replayed like thunder on loop. The video call icon returned to blue, and Elena said, "I'll try once more," but her thumb would not move. Morning crept in like a verdict, and Elena said, "I dreamed we were on the same street." Her mug steamed and tasted of nothing. Lucas said, "I crashed after the shoot," in a message that landed too clean. She replayed his clip of a busy set, and envy crawled under her skin. Jonah said, "You keep giving him tomorrow for the cost of your today." The apartment felt borrowed from someone braver. Aria's new photo showed Lucas laughing, and Elena said, "Who took that?" She told herself the city would answer if she walked far enough. Her shoes waited by the door like small, tired witnesses. The kettle clicked again, and she said, "I'm not crazy, I'm careful," though the word careful shook. She opened their shared album and counted weekends that never happened. Lucas said soon, beneath a sunset that felt rented. Elena scrolled past promises like receipts. The elevator groaned, and she said, "Maybe I ask for what I want." The lobby smelled of rain and mail. Jonah said, "Ask for proof, not poetry," and she laughed without sound. She typed a question and replaced it with a smile. Aria posted a rap party tease, and the comments sang his name. Elena said, "One honest call tonight," and the words burned like a vow. Work emails crowded the screen, but her eyes held the message thread. Lucas said, "Time zones hate us," and she said, "Then fight them with me." The clock app showed 3 cities like stubborn stars. She drafted a calendar invite titled, "Truth." Jonah said, "Name the need, not the fear." She wrote, "I need you live at 9, and deleted twice. A courier buzzed, and she ignored it. Aria's story flashed studio lights, and Elena said, "I won't be optional." The invite finally sent, and the room exhaled with her. Evening returned with rain and a pulse of courage. Elena set the lamp low and said, 9 means 9. The call window waited like a door. Lucas said, "Running late, 10? And the text stung clean. She typed, "I can't keep bending," and erased the last word. Jonah said, "Bend is how things break." Her heart beat in the cursor's blink. The city roared, and then hushed like a held breath. Elena said, 1 hour, and then I'm done, and the promise startled her into stillness. Sun pushed through the blinds like a slow apology, and Elena said, "I built my mornings around his time zone." Her planner was a battlefield of alarms and crossed out dates. Lucas said, "I hate that I miss you," and she answered with a heart she did not feel. She remembered tutoring extra hours to afford flights that never happened. Jonah said, "You trade sleep for hope," and she nodded into the mug. The apartment carried the shape of waiting, neat and breathless. Aria's laugh from a clip bled under the door like music from a neighbor. Elena said, "He chose me first," and the words trembled. She traced the map on her wall and connected airports with string. The thread sagged where promises had broken their weight. At the cafe counter, she rehearsed truths like lines, and Elena said, "I need more than almost." The barista misspelled her name again. Lucas said, "I can't talk till rap," and the words felt pre-recorded. Jonah said, "Ask for tonight, not someday." She typed, "Can you be present at 9, and left it unsent. The city steamed from the rain and her coat carried the chill. Aria posted a behind-the-scenes hug that looked harmless and didn't. Elena said, "Trust is not a riddle to the foam that caved in." A toddler waved, and she waved back with a cracked smile. The cup grew light and her resolve heavier. She scrolled their first messages and felt the room tilt. Lucas said, "Save me a place in your future," and she believed it like weather. The plant by the window leaned toward a light she could not name. "Fine?" Jonah said, "Name the boundary," and she wrote, "If you love me, show up." She deleted love and wrote "See me." Arya's tag on his post glowed like a beacon she did not want. Elena said, "I'm not jealous, I'm starving for proof." The clock marked the hours she had traded for Mabes. Her hands shook and then steadied around the truth. She called her mother and lied that everything was fine. A pause grew long roots. Lucas said, "One more delay," and the word more carved a groove in her chest. Jonah said, "Your heart is not a lobby." She smiled at the ceiling to keep from breaking. Arya's reel flashed fireworks and fast edits, and Elena said, "What does joy look like off camera?" The kettle sang, and she let it sing. She drafted a message that carried weight like a packed suitcase. She wrote, "Tonight at 9, or we name this gone." Evening drew its line across the floor, and Elena stepped to it. Lucas said, "You know I care," and she said, "Care is a verb." She scheduled the call and pinned it like a flag. Jonah said, "Say the need out loud," and she said, "I need him present, not nearby." The city's neon blinked like a stubborn heartbeat. Arya went quiet, which felt louder than noise. Elena set her camera at eye level and cleaned the lens. She whispered, "If you show up, I'll stay," and heard the echo answer, "And if not?" Rain started again like a habit the sky could not break, and Elena said, "If he cancels, I won't fill the space for him." The message thread blinked with old softness and new rust. Lucas said, "Signal is bad," and she answered, "Then try harder than bad." Jonah said, "You're negotiating with a ghost," and she laughed like a door chain rattling. Arya posted a selfie from the studio couch, and Elena said, "Who holds the camera when he smiles like that?" Her chest kept inventing good reasons and running out. The clock advanced as if pushed by strangers. She wrote, "Show me you're here," and did not send it. The room felt crowded by people who were not in it, and she stood very still to hear who stayed. The call finally rang and then stopped like a prank from fate. Elena said, "Try again," to the empty ringtone. Lucas said, "Battery," and she said, "Charge the thing that connects us." She watched their first photo, sunlit and impossible, and felt the present dim by comparison. Jonah said, "Patterns are promises wearing masks." The kettle clicked, but she did not move. Arya's reel panned across a wrap table where someone poured champagne. Elena said, "If he's celebrating, why can't he say my name?" She typed, "Do you want this?" and stared until the words became a mirror. The studio sent a press shot that traveled through her group chat like a storm. Lucas said, "Publicity not personal," and she said, "But it is my personal." Arya's arms circled his shoulders in a way that looked staged and didn't. Jonah said, "Ask the question you avoid." She typed, "Are you with her after hours?" and held her breath. 3 dots appeared and died like small birds. The silence made a map of everywhere he might be. She said, "Choose me while I am still here to be chosen." A siren passed outside, and the room blinked with red. She walked to the river because the apartment had learned her fears too well. Wind pressed her coat flat and honest. Lucas said, "You know how set days run," and she answered, "I know how choices run." Jonah called and said, "Stand where your voice carries." She said, "I'm loud in my head and quiet in his life." Street lights flickered awake like tired guards. Arya's comment thread praised chemistry, and Elena said, "Chemistry is not commitment." The current moved the same direction whether love did or not. She turned back when the cold reached bone and certainty. Back home, the invite for a late call slid across the screen like a dare. Lucas said, "Give me 30, and she said, "I gave you years." The word years surprised them both. Jonah texted, "I'm outside if you need a friend more than a promise." She said, "Stay near," and finally sent the question about Arya. The dots returned, slower, heavier. He wrote, "It's complicated," and she felt something simple break. The rain stopped, and the quiet felt like judgment. She whispered, "I will not audition for love," and set the phone down as if it could bite. Elena sat frozen with the words, "It's complicated," burning into her eyes. Lucas said, "You know I never meant to hurt you," and she whispered, "Then why does it feel like a wound?" Jonah said, "Truth wears the clothes of excuses when people are afraid." She scrolled through photos of nights promised and never lived. Aria's face lingered in too many frames. Elena said, "I am not afraid of love. I am afraid of being the only one holding it." The walls pulsed with silence, her phone heavy as stone. She typed, "Did she replace me?" and left it waiting like a loaded chamber. The reply came slow as if dragged across a broken floor. "We've been spending time, but it doesn't mean," Elena said. "It means enough to tear me apart." Lucas said, "She's a friend," but the word friend cracked like glass underfoot. Jonah said, "Sometimes the word is camouflage." Her hand shook, and she steadied it against the nightstand. She thought of birthdays unshared and tickets never booked. Aria's arm across his shoulders glared brighter now. Elena said, "I begged for crumbs while someone else feasted, and the truth sliced clean." The night deepened, and she did not blink. She opened the chat thread like a surgeon lifting ribs. Lucas said, "You knew distance was poison." And she answered, "But poison works only when swallowed." Jonah said, "You carried all the weight," and he carried his silence. Elena stared at her own reflection in the black screen and said, "I don't recognize the girl who begged for Mabes." Aria's post bloomed again, their smiles too close, too natural. The seconds ticked, each a hammer. She said, "I gave him oceans, and he drowned me in a drop," and the words tasted like iron. The storm outside grew louder, as if agreeing. Her chest pulled tight as she dialed again, and the call connected with silence. Lucas said, "I can't explain this on video," and she said, "Then your silence will be louder than words." Jonah's message buzzed, "You deserve someone who shows up." She pressed the phone to her ear until it grew hot. The call dropped into nothing, leaving her breathless. Elena said, "He left me to fight shadows and rivals I never asked for." Aria's laughter in a saved clip erupted like cruelty in her memory. She whispered, "I am not the secret," and her hands finally steadied. She opened the drawer where a plane ticket lay unsent to his city. The paper felt heavier than iron. Lucas said, "We'll figure this out," and she said, "You already figured me out as optional." Jonah said, "Sometimes endings save lives, not ruin them." She folded the ticket slowly, the way you fold a goodbye. Aria's shadow loomed over every half-smile she remembered. Elena said, "I was never supposed to beg to be chosen," and the words cracked her voice. She set the ticket back, but this time like burial. The night turned to a verdict, final and unblinking. 9 arrived like a deadline carved in stone. Elena sat before the screen, every breath stiff as glass. Lucas said, "I'm here now," and she said, "You're here after the storm, not before." His face pixelated, half light, half shadow. Jonah's text buzzed, "Say what you rehearsed. Don't soften it." Elena said, "I gave up nights, jobs, friends, pieces of myself, and you gave me delay." Lucas said, "You don't understand the pressure." And she whispered, "I understand absence too well." The connection lagged, stretching silence like a blade. Her reflection in the screen looked stronger than she felt. Elena's voice rose, breaking through the lag. She said, "You let her name fill my silence." Lucas said, "Aria doesn't mean what you think." And she said, "Then tell me what she means." His eyes darted away, his mouth stalled. Jonah's words echoed, proof, not poetry. She pressed forward, "I asked for hours, you gave her days." Lucas said, "She's just part of work," but his tone betrayed him. Elena leaned closer and whispered, "Work doesn't hold you like that." His silence folded into the call, heavy and guilty. The room's walls closed in as if listening too. The fight cracked open like glass under weight. Elena said, "You built a world without me, and called it love." Lucas said, I never stopped loving you, but his words rang hollow. Jonah's earlier warning screamed inside her. He gives you maybe, not yes. Elena said, love that hides me is not love. His face blurred, whether from connection or shame. She stood, pacing, her hands shaking. The storm outside pounded like a chorus. She stopped, leaned close and said, I deserve presence, not a ghost. He said nothing, and the silence felt final. Her body stilled, breath sharp. Elena said, this is the moment we decide. Lucas said, don't force me, and she said, I'm asking you to choose, not cage. His jaw clenched on the screen, his silence shouting louder than words. Jonah's name lit her phone, but she ignored it. She said, I've waded through empty beds, half-truths, and borrowed promises. Tonight I need one clear answer. Lucas said, I can't, and the words split the night open. She closed her eyes, letting the weight of years fall into her lap. The call ended not with a click but a collapse. Elena said, you can't love me halfway. The screen dimmed to black, her reflection staring back like a stranger. Jonah knocked at the door, and she whispered, not yet. Arya's shadow filled every silence, but Elena stood taller. She said, I am done being an option, and the words steadied her spine. The city roared outside as if applauding or mourning. She turned off the lamp, letting darkness cradle her new edge. For the first time, silence felt like a beginning. Morning found the room tidy in the way aftershocks pretend to be peace. Elena said, I meant it, and the words did not wobble. The laptop sat closed like a sealed letter. Jonah said, breathe from the ribs, not the worry, and she tried. The kettle hissed and did not accuse her. She wiped the table and felt the grain under her palm. Lucas said, can we talk later? And she let the message sit like a leaf on a river. Arya's name did not own the air anymore. Elena said, I will not chase echoes, and stood taller. She answered Jonah, coffee in an hour, and the simple plan steadied her bones. Outside, the street sounded ordinary and kind. She took one photo of the clean desk, proof that endings can be orderly. She met Jonah at the corner cafe that smelled like warm bread and new starts. Jonah said, you didn't lose, you chose, and she let the sentence warm her. She said, I kept mistaking patience for love. He nodded without rescuing her. Lucas said, I am outside the studio if you want to call, and she silenced the alert. The city moved without needing her permission. Elena said, I want a love that is here, and the truth fit like shoes that finally matched her feet. Jonah said, grief is loud, but it leaves, and she smiled. She ordered something sweet and finished it slowly. She did not check who liked anything. The clock above the counter ticked like a friend. Back home, she gathered the artifacts of waiting and gave them names. Elena said, this was the weekend that never happened, folding an itinerary into the recycling. She held a photo strip and let it be only paper. Lucas said, I didn't mean complicated to mean guilty, and she said to the room, it meant alone. Jonah texted, proud of you, and she breathed slower. She opened the window and invited the ordinary air inside. Arya's feed scrolled by and did not pull her under. She said, I can forgive without returning, and felt the sentence unlock a door. The rug brightened under the sun. The map on the wall looked like places again. Her mother called and asked about sleep, and Elena said, I slept enough to know my name. The pause held pride instead of worry. Lucas said, I can explain if you give me time, and she typed I gave time and kept myself, then stopped. Jonah said, you owe him a boundary, not a hearing. She wrote, I wish you well, and sent it. The message looked small and complete. She stood by the window and counted 10 breaths. The streetlight blinked on even though it was early. Elena said, I am practicing not being afraid of free hours. The room did not echo. It listened. Night returned without the old dread, and Elena set a new ritual on the desk. She wrote 3 lines in a notebook that had waited months. She said, today I chose clarity over hope, and the ink did not shake. Jonah sent a photo of the river and the caption, "Water keeps moving." She replied with a small sun emoji and nothing else. Lucas said, "I'm sorry," and she did not answer. The apartment sounded like the inside of a held promise. She turned the camera to face the room and took a picture for no one. She whispered, "I am already on the other side." The silence felt like a hand on her back, not a hand on her throat. The night stretched into a silence that was less like absence and more like ceremony. Elena sat by the window, the city below her moving as if nothing had shifted, yet everything inside her had. She said, "It's strange, the world doesn't pause for heartbreak." The neon across the street blinked, steady and unbothered. Lucas said earlier, "I'm sorry," but the apology rang like a dull bell, hollow and far away. She thought of the years she had given, nights of waiting, mornings planned around his schedule, the patience that carved her into someone both fragile and strong. Jonah's words replayed, "You didn't lose, you chose." She whispered, "I chose the truth, even if it burns." Her reflection in the glass looked older, steadier, less like the girl who waited and more like the woman who walked. Aria's shadow no longer swallowed the air. Instead, it faded like smoke. Elena said, "I loved with both hands, and I can let go with both hands." The city kept breathing, but now she matched its rhythm. Morning came not as punishment but as release. The first light spilled through her curtains, pale and forgiving. Elena brewed coffee and said, "I survived the night without calling him." Lucas had not messaged again, his silence as sharp as any word. Jonah texted, "Breakfast?" And she smiled at the ordinary invitation. She thought of how love once lived in notifications, and how freedom now meant ignoring them. She whispered, "I am not measured by who waits for me on the other side of a screen." She opened her notebook and wrote a line she did not erase. "I am whole without him." Aria's page flickered past her thumb, and she did not stop to look. She said, "I can witness without drowning." The kettle whistled and she turned it off without rush. The city outside seemed to nod at her. She said, "I will not rebuild on the ashes, but on the soil beneath." And she drank her coffee slowly, like a vow. Later that day she walked to the market, where vendors called out names of fruit and children tugged at their parents' sleeves. The normalcy wrapped around her like a blanket. She said, "I thought the world would collapse without him, but it didn't." Lucas's voice haunted her like a ghost, but each step made it fainter. Jonah met her near the stalls and handed her a paper bag of apples. He said, "You look lighter." She said, "Because I'm carrying only myself now." He laughed, and it felt like the sound her apartment had been missing. She passed a florist who tucked a daisy into her hand, and she whispered, "Thank you," as if the universe had conspired to remind her of beginnings. Aria's name no longer triggered envy but disinterest. She said, "This was never about her, only about what I allowed." The crowd moved, and she moved with it, no longer tethered to distance. She thought, love is not absence endured, but presence chosen. She let the words stay. Evening brought the quiet she once feared, but now welcomed. She returned home with groceries and placed them in neat rows, each act a small ritual of control. Lucas said nothing, and she felt the silence lose its sting. Jonah called and said, "We should watch the river rise tomorrow." And she said, "Ice." She realized she no longer needed explanations or excuses. She whispered, "I am no longer the girl who begged the clock to move." Her apartment felt larger, not because it changed, but because her heart was no longer cramped by waiting. Aria's shadow had evaporated completely, leaving only her own outline on the wall. She said, "I was never losing him. I was losing myself. Now I've found me again." The fridge hummed, the streetlights clicked alive, and her body felt heavy but not broken. She wrote another line in her notebook. "Silence can heal when it is chosen, not given." The words settled into her chest like truth. The last message arrived just after midnight. Lucas wrote, "Please don't erase me." Elena read it once and closed the screen. She said, You already erased yourself when you let me wait. Jonah's earlier words echoed. Endings save lives. She looked out at the city, alive with neon veins, and whispered, "This is my life, not his absence." She folded the years of waiting into a single sentence in her notebook. He was the silence. I was the echo. And now I am the voice. She smiled not from victory, but from survival. Arya would fade into the archive of her memory, harmless at last. The night breathed with her, slow and unburdened. She whispered, "And that was the last time his name ever lit up my phone." The words sliced and soothed all at once. The screen dimmed, her reflection watching her steady, unafraid. She lay down, the city pulsing outside, her own pulse no longer tied to a distant ghost. The story ended with her beginning.